At 8:07 on Monday morning, every employee at Kestrel Vale Technologies received the same email, 5 days a week. Every department, every office, no exceptions. The subject line said, "Bringing our culture home." 3 weeks later, nearly 1,800 people were expected to return to a headquarters building with barely enough desks for 1,100. I knew that because space planning was my job. What I did not know was why the CEO seemed completely unconcerned. Then, at 8:19, the CFO sent me the confidential lease portfolio and asked me to confirm the surrender dates for 6 floors. I opened the appendix. 3 of those floors were scheduled to be empty less than 2 months after everyone returned. Beside each date was a projected employee count, and in the final column were 2 words no facilities plan should ever contain: separation complete. By noon, the CEO wanted to know why I had opened that page. By 3, my access badge had stopped working, but by then, the document was already under legal hold. My name is Elena Ward. For 7 years, I ran workplace strategy for Kestrel Vale, a fictional enterprise software company that had grown too quickly, leased too much space, and spent the next several years pretending those 2 decisions had nothing to do with each other. I negotiated office renewals. I planned employee seating. I tracked occupancy. I coordinated with finance whenever a floor was expanded, closed, or offered for sublease. In other words, I knew the difference between a company preparing to bring people back and a company preparing to make people disappear from a spreadsheet. At first, I told myself the lease plan might be outdated. Maybe someone had copied an old workforce forecast into the wrong column. Maybe separation referred to separating one lease from another. Corporate documents are often written in a language designed to make ordinary decisions sound like satellite launches. But then I checked the creation history. The lease plan had been approved 6 weeks before the CEO announced the return mandate. The workforce numbers had been updated 4 days before his email, and one executive comment was still visible in the margin. Attendance enforcement should precede final reduction. That was when I stopped thinking we had a seating problem. We had a timeline problem, and somebody had assumed no one responsible for the buildings would understand what the dates meant. Before I tell you what happened when I asked the CEO about that comment, subscribe for more original corporate accountability stories. And tell me in the comments, would you confront the executive first, or go directly to legal? I had less than 4 hours to make that decision. Kestrel Vale had once been the kind of company people bragged about joining. Free lunches, flexible schedules, a founder who remembered engineers' names. Then the founder retired, and the board hired Grant Mercer. Grant had never built a product. He had built presentations about products. He spoke in polished sentences that sounded important until you tried to repeat them. Under Grant, our employee town halls became stage productions. Every announcement had a slogan. Every budget cut had a theme. Every cancelled project became a strategic concentration of resources. The full return to office order was his biggest production yet. At 9 that morning, he held an emergency leadership call. His camera was framed perfectly. Behind him was a bookshelf containing several books that had clearly never been opened. "Culture cannot be downloaded," he said. "Mentorship does not happen through a screen. Our next chapter requires proximity." Nobody interrupted. Then he moved to the implementation slide. All employees within commuting distance were expected on-site Monday through Friday. Remote designations would be reviewed. Exceptions would require executive approval. Managers would receive attendance dashboards. And workplace strategy, meaning me, would have 21 days to make the headquarters ready. I looked at the occupancy box in the corner of the slide. 1,784 assigned employees. I looked at our certified seating count, 1,112 desks. I raised my hand. Grant, where are the remaining employees expected to sit? He smiled as though I had offered him an easy question. We have underused collaboration space. Those numbers already include conference rooms and shared areas. Then we create energy, he said. People adapt. I tried again. We would need temporary seating, fire capacity review, parking adjustments, network expansion, and at least 2 additional floors. The CFO, Diane Kell, entered the conversation. We are not taking additional floors. That was strange. We had 3 expansion options available under our lease. Expensive options, yes, but possible. What headcount assumption should I use? I asked. Grant's smile disappeared. Current headcount does not fit. He leaned closer to his camera. Elena, your responsibility is execution. Leadership will handle the assumptions. That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was insulting, because it was precise. He did not say the assumptions were wrong. He said they were not my responsibility. After the call, my team gathered in conference room Birch. There were 6 of us. Mina handled occupancy data. Theo managed construction. Asha coordinated accessibility and workplace accommodations. 2 analysts maintained our lease and badge systems. And Marcus, my deputy, had the rare ability to translate executive nonsense into tasks people could complete. He wrote the numbers on the whiteboard. Even if everyone shares, he said, we're short by several hundred seats. Mina opened the attendance model. Not just seats, parking exceeds capacity by Tuesday. The elevators fail the morning load target. The cafeteria cannot handle the peak. Theo pointed toward the ceiling. And if they want to convert collaboration areas into workstations, permits alone could take longer than 3 weeks. I told them to model every lawful and safe option. Split shifts, temporary furniture, department rotations, off-site space. I also told them not to speculate about layoffs. At that point, all we had was an impossible instruction. Impossible instructions are not evidence. They are simply common in executive offices. At 8:19, while we were still working, Diane sent me the lease portfolio. Her message contained 1 sentence: validate surrender sequence and return comments before close of business. The attachment was named Project Lighthouse, Final Lease Optimization. I had heard the name Lighthouse before. Finance used it for real estate reduction discussions, but I had never seen the final model. The first 6 worksheets were ordinary: rent, renewal options, maintenance costs, sublease estimates, furniture disposal, building access dates. The 7th worksheet was hidden from the normal tab view, but it appeared in the appendix index because the PDF export had preserved it. Its title was Occupancy Transition. I clicked it. There were our floors, there were the surrender dates, there were the projected active employee counts, and beside each floor was a sequence: return enforcement, attendance review, manager calibration, separation window, space release. I read it twice, then a 3rd time. Facilities plans do not normally schedule manager calibration before a floor is emptied. Lease teams do not decide when employees separate. Someone had merged a workplace plan with a workforce plan, and they had left the dates aligned. The first reduction date was 14 days after the mandatory return. The second was 4 weeks later. The third appeared just before the company planned to surrender 2 full floors to the landlord. The numbers dropped in stages. Not random fluctuations, not resignations based on historical averages. Whole teams vanished between one row and the next. Customer implementation lost nearly half its assigned seats. Quality assurance moved from 2 floors to 1 corner. Internal support disappeared from headquarters entirely. I called Mina into my office and turned the monitor toward her. "Tell me what you see." She studied the worksheet without speaking. Then she pointed at the projected headcount column. "These cannot be lease estimates." "Why?" The employee totals matched the HR workforce dashboard. I felt my stomach tighten. Mina continued. "Facilities rounds by seat type. HR counts people. These are people." She clicked into the document properties. A list of contributors appeared. Diane Kell, CFO, Paula Wynn, Chief People Officer, Grant Mercer, CEO, and someone from outside counsel, whose name I did not recognize. There was also a link to an HR communications folder. We did not open it. Neither Mina nor I had authorization for HR separation materials. That distinction mattered. Finding a document inside a portfolio assigned to me was one thing. Exploring restricted folders was another. I copied the approved internal link to the lease file. I did not download it to a personal device. I did not photograph the screen. I did not send it to my private email. Then I called Malik Shah, our general counsel. "Malik, I need you to review a document that was assigned to me by finance." "What kind of document?" "A lease plan containing workforce separation dates." There was a pause. "Do not forward it outside the company." "I haven't." "Do not alter it." "I haven't." "Send me the internal link and the assignment email. Nothing else." I sent both while he was still on the phone. 30 seconds later, he said, "I have it." Then another pause. Longer this time. "Elena, who else has seen this? My team knows there is a capacity discrepancy." Mina saw the worksheet with me. "Tell everyone to preserve their notes. No speculation in chat. No external communications. I am placing the file under legal hold." That was the moment the story changed. I had expected him to tell me I was misreading the document. Instead, he was preserving it. Malik came to my office 20 minutes later. He closed the door and placed a printed copy of the lease appendix on my desk. He had highlighted 3 sections. The first was the creation date. The lease reduction plan existed before the RTO announcement. The second was the projected headcount. The space reductions depended on hundreds of employees, no longer being assigned to headquarters. The third was a note beneath the separation schedule. It suggested that departures connected with attendance enforcement would be accounted for before the remaining workforce reductions were finalized. I looked at him. "Is that legal?" "That is not a question I can answer from one worksheet." His tone was calm, but his face was not. Companies can require employees to work on-site in many circumstances. Companies can reduce staff. Companies can reduce office space. None of those decisions automatically proves misconduct. Then what is the problem? The problem is the timeline. He tapped the first highlighted section. If leadership had already approved a reduction of this size, there may be notice obligations. Federal requirements depend on employer size, worksite definitions, the number of affected employees, and other facts. State law may impose additional requirements. He moved his finger to the HR note. And if this language means what it appears to mean, someone may have expected attendance-related departures to change how the planned reduction was counted. Can they do that? Voluntary resignations and planned terminations are not automatically treated the same way, but intent, documentation, and the complete sequence matter. We need employment counsel. I asked the question that had been sitting in my throat. Did the board approve this? Malik looked at the contributor list. I do not know. That frightened me more than an answer would have. A CEO can make many operational decisions. A reduction affecting hundreds of employees, major lease exits, and possible legal notice exposure is not something a responsible board should discover by accident. Malik opened his laptop. I am notifying the audit committee chair and outside employment counsel. Should I speak with Grant? You were assigned to validate the lease sequence. Ask the business questions required for your role. Do not accuse anyone of breaking the law. What if he asks whether I contacted you? Tell the truth. That was Malik. No dramatic speech. No promise that everything would be fine. Just procedure. Procedure is not glamorous. But when powerful people become careless, procedure is often the only thing standing between a record and a rewrite. At 11:47, Grant's assistant invited me to Executive Conference Room 1. Diane was already inside. So was Paula from HR. No Malik. No member of my team. A printed copy of the lease plan sat face down in front of Grant. He did not ask me to sit. Elena, Diane tells me you have concerns about the return plan. I have capacity concerns and questions about the lease schedule. What questions? The headquarters does not have enough certified workstations for the current assigned population. We covered that. The lease portfolio assumes a substantially lower active headcount shortly after the return date. Diane crossed her arms. Those are planning scenarios. Then which scenario should workplace strategy implement? The approved one, she said. Which headcount is approved? No one answered. I continued. The appendix includes employee separation windows. Facilities cannot validate dates that belong to HR. Paula finally spoke. That language should not have been visible to your team. That was not a denial. Grant placed both hands on the table. You were given a lease document to review. Instead, you escalated a confidential planning model. I sent the assigned document to General Counsel. His expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. You involved Malik? Yes. Before speaking with me? The document contained workforce dates and an external legal contributor. Preserving it was appropriate. Grant pushed his chair back. This is exactly the problem with functional leaders who confuse access with authority. I kept my voice level. I am not claiming authority over workforce decisions. I am asking which employee count I should use to execute your order safely. He stared at me. Current head count. Then we need more space. We are not leasing more space. Then the employees do not fit. They will. When? Silence. I looked at Diane, then Paula, then back at Grant. Did the board approve the reductions reflected in this model? Grant's jaw tightened. You were hired to manage buildings, Elena, not interrogate leadership. I am responsible for signing the occupancy certification. Not anymore. Diane looked toward him. Grant. He raised one hand. Effective immediately. Workplace implementation will report through finance. Elena, turn over your files and take the rest of the week away from the office. Am I being suspended? You are being asked to step back. Will I retain system access? We will determine what is appropriate. I stood. Please put the instruction in writing. His face hardened. This is not a negotiation. No, it is a record. I left the room at 12:06. At 12:14, my building badge stopped working. At 12:17, my company email disconnected. At 12:22, Malik called my personal number. Do not attempt to regain access, he said. The legal hold was activated before your permissions changed. I closed my eyes. So they cannot remove the file? They can rename a folder. They cannot erase the preservation copy. While I sat in the lobby waiting for security to bring down my bag, the executive floor entered damage control mode. I learned the details later through the board investigation. At 12:25, Diane messaged IT and asked why the Lighthouse folder had been restricted. IT replied that General Counsel had issued a preservation hold. At 12:31, Paula asked her HR director to locate every draft connected with return to office attendance. At 12:38, the HR director found a communications document created before the public RTO announcement. Its title was Workforce Transition, Employee Questions. One question read, "Why were employees required to return shortly before roles were eliminated?" The draft answer did not deny the timing. It said that workplace policy and organizational design were independent strategic decisions. Another section instructed managers not to discuss future staffing plans during attendance conversations. At 12:44, Grant called Malik. According to the call memorandum, Grant described the lease appendix as an unapproved working draft. Malik asked whether the headcount reductions had been approved. Grant said the numbers were directional. Malik asked why HR had drafted employee layoff questions. Grant ended the call. At 12:53, Outside Employment Counsel received the preservation packet. At 1:11, Evelyn Ross, chair of the board's Audit and Risk Committee, requested an emergency briefing. At 1:26, Grant attempted to move the following week's board meeting. Evelyn refused. At 1:40, the company's document system generated a version history report. The report showed that Grant had personally approved the workforce assumptions before recording the RTO video. The return order had not created the reduction plan, it had been placed on top of it. And that was only the first problem. The lease schedule separated the reductions into several dates. Individually, each phase appeared smaller. Viewed together, they formed one continuous headquarters plan. That did not automatically establish a legal violation, but it gave outside counsel a question management could not answer casually. Why had a single workforce plan been divided across multiple dates, and why did the company expect attendance enforcement to occur first? Security eventually brought me a cardboard box, a notebook, 2 framed photographs, a coffee mug, a pair of shoes I had forgotten under my desk. No laptop, no files, no confidential documents. I signed the property receipt and walked outside. Marcus was waiting near the parking garage. "You okay?" "I do not know yet. They told us you were taking personal leave." "I did not request leave." He shook his head. "The implementation team has been moved under Diane. Do exactly what you are instructed to do, but document safety and capacity concerns." "Are layoffs coming?" "I cannot discuss confidential material." That answer disappointed him. It disappointed me too. But protecting employees did not give me the right to spread unverified conclusions. "Should we quit?" he asked. "No. Do not make a permanent decision based on a rumor." "What should we do?" "Keep doing your jobs properly. Do not delete anything, do not exaggerate anything, and do not let anyone change the certified seating count." He nodded. Then he handed me a folded page. It was not confidential. It was the public headquarters fire capacity summary, the same version available to every building tenant. Someone from finance had asked Theo to increase the listed workstation capacity without construction. "Can they do that?" Marcus asked. "Not honestly. I photographed nothing. I took nothing. I told Marcus to send the request to safety, legal, and the building manager through his company account." The most important evidence in a corporate investigation is not always a secret recording. Often it is an ordinary employee refusing to enter a false number. That afternoon, I went home and waited. At 4:10, I had 9 missed calls. 3 from Diane, 2 from Paula, 4 from Grant's assistant. I returned none of them. At 4:23, Malik emailed my personal address with one sentence approved by outside counsel: "You remain employed and should not communicate with management until the board review is complete." They had removed my access, but they had not managed to remove me. The audit committee met the next morning. Evelyn Ross had spent 30 years evaluating operational risk. She did not care about slogans, she cared about dates. Outside counsel presented a timeline. First, finance modeled the surrender of multiple floors. Then HR inserted projected active headcount. Then executives added phased separation windows. Then communications drafted return-to-office messaging. Then HR prepared questions anticipating that employees would notice layoffs following the return. Finally, Grant announced that the mandate was about culture, collaboration, and mentorship. Evelyn asked one question: which decision came first? Diane answered, "The lease review." "That was not my question." Grant stepped in. "Workforce planning and workplace planning developed together. So the workforce reductions existed before the return announcement? They were scenarios. Approved scenarios, planning assumptions." And Evelyn turned toward outside counsel. Was the board informed? Counsel displayed the board materials from the previous quarter. They contained a general cost-saving target. No phased headquarters reduction. No separation dates. No plan to surrender 3 floors. No estimate of the potential employee notice exposure. Evelyn looked back at Grant. "You asked the board to approve a collaboration initiative. It was a collaboration initiative. Was increased voluntary attrition part of its financial model?" Grant did not answer immediately. That pause became part of the record. Diane tried to help him. "We expected some employees would prefer not to return." "Expected?" Evelyn asked. "Or required?" "Expected." "Did the lease plan depend on those departures?" Diane looked down at the table. Outside counsel advanced to the final slide. It showed the headquarters population needed to reach the lease target. Without attendance-related departures, the later reduction would have been larger. Evelyn removed her glasses. So the company announced a full return, while privately assuming that some employees would leave, and the resulting departures were incorporated into the space reduction plan. Grant finally responded, "That is an aggressive characterization." Evelyn pointed toward the screen. "It is your spreadsheet." Malik then explained what the documents did and did not establish. A return mandate was not automatically unlawful. A workforce reduction was not automatically unlawful. A lease surrender was not automatically unlawful. The risk came from the complete sequence. Leadership had modeled the workforce reduction before the public announcement. Management may have intended attendance enforcement to produce departures that would reduce the remaining headcount action. The reductions had been divided across multiple dates, even though the documents treated them as one coordinated headquarters plan. Employee communications had been drafted before workers were told that their jobs were at risk. The board had not received the complete plan. And after I raised the issue with General Counsel, my system access had been removed within hours. Grant interrupted. Elena was not retaliated against. She was removed from an implementation she could no longer manage objectively. Evelyn looked toward Malik. Did she violate policy? No. Did she access a document outside her authorization? No. Finance assigned her the portfolio for validation. Did she distribute it externally? No. Did she preserve it through the correct channel? Yes. Then why was her access removed? Nobody answered. The silence lasted only a few seconds. But in a boardroom, silence has weight. Outside counsel recommended 4 immediate actions. Pause the workforce reductions. Pause enforcement actions connected with the RTO mandate. Issue preservation instructions to all involved executives. Begin a review of federal, state, contractual and accommodation obligations. Evelyn approved all 4. Then she turned toward Grant. You will take administrative leave during the investigation. He looked genuinely shocked. "You cannot remove the CEO over a planning document." "No," Evelyn said. "But the board can remove a CEO who conceals material operational risk and interferes with the employee who reported it." Grant looked toward Diane. Diane looked toward Paula. Paula looked toward the HR draft projected on the wall. No one looked back at him. The company did not become heroic overnight. Companies rarely do. It became cautious. Outside counsel reviewed every planned reduction. The company delayed the separation dates. Where notice was potentially required, formal notices were prepared. The board approved enhanced severance, continued health coverage for a transition period, and independent career placement support. Employees who had requested remote arrangements for medical, disability, or caregiving reasons received individualized reviews rather than automatic rejection. The full 5-day mandate was replaced with a department-based hybrid policy while the company studied actual role requirements and building capacity. That decision did not satisfy everyone. Some employees still lost their jobs. A lawful process does not make job loss painless, but people received time, information, benefits, the ability to plan, and the company stopped pretending that a surprise could be made ethical by placing it beneath a slogan. My workplace team returned to its original reporting line. Theo refused to alter the occupancy number and received a written commendation from the audit committee. Mina became Director of Workplace Analytics. Marcus led the safe reopening plan. As for me, Evelyn called 3 days after the board meeting. "We would like you to return." "To my old role?" "Temporarily. We need someone to separate the real estate decisions from the workforce decisions and document both properly." "What happens after that?" "That depends on what you want." For the first time in 7 years, I realized I had been so busy making Kestrel Vale function that I had never asked whether I still wanted to belong there. "I will return for the investigation and transition," I said. "Not permanently." She accepted the answer. Powerful people often assume loyalty means a person has nowhere else to go. Sometimes loyalty simply means that person has not yet chosen to leave. The external investigation lasted 11 weeks. Its conclusions were not dramatic enough for a movie. They were more damaging than that. Grant had authorized the RTO announcement without disclosing the complete workforce assumptions to the board. Diane had approved a lease plan whose financial success depended on headcount reductions that had not completed legal review. Paula had allowed employee communications to be drafted around decisions workers had not been told were under consideration. The report did not claim that every participant had broken a law. It concluded that the process created unacceptable legal, ethical, and governance risk. Grant resigned before the board voted on his removal. The company announcement thanked him for his leadership. Corporate announcements are often most polite when the relationship has ended badly. Diane left several weeks later. Paula remained long enough to implement the transition, then accepted a position elsewhere. Malik became interim chief administrative officer. The board created a workforce risk committee requiring legal, HR, finance, and workplace leaders to review major staffing and real estate decisions together. No hidden worksheets, no separate timelines, no slogans before approvals. Kestrel Vale eventually surrendered 2 floors, not 3. The headquarters became smaller, but it finally had enough seats for the people expected to use it. That should not have felt revolutionary. It did. On my final day, I returned to conference room Birch. The same whiteboard was still mounted on the wall. Someone had left the first calculation faintly visible beneath several weeks of notes. 1,784 employees. 1,112 desks. the numbers that started everything. Mina handed me a framed copy of the revised occupancy plan. At the bottom, my team had written, "Assumptions belong in the open." I placed it in my box beside the coffee mug. Security had returned to me months earlier. Then I surrendered my badge. This time, it was my decision. I later started a small workplace risk advisory firm, helping companies coordinate real estate, staffing, and employee communication, before one spreadsheet contradicted another. Kestrel Vale became our second client. They paid on time. The lesson was never that every return to office order hides a layoff. Most do not. The lesson was that leaders reveal their real priorities through the plans they believe employees will never compare. The CEO's email said everyone was returning because the company needed them together. The lease plan showed that leadership had already decided hundreds of them would not remain. They ordered everyone back to prove who controlled the office. Instead, the office records proved who had concealed the truth. Would you have confronted the CEO first, or gone directly to legal? Share your answer below, and subscribe for more original stories about workplace betrayal, documentation, and lawful corporate accountability.